and hello students. Welcome to another session of the same chapter, that is life process. In the previous session, we looked at what is the transport system in plants and how plants take up the salts, minerals and the food which is being prepared by the leaf. Now in this session, we are going to look at the transportation in human, that is the blood and lymph. That will be the topic for us today. And what are the subtopics we are going to take up for today? The first one will be why blood is a transportation medium. Why is it like we only have that? And what are the components of blood? What is exactly blood made up of? That will be the subtopic there. And what are the different functions of blood? Apart from that, there are some known functions of these blood. Now, what exactly is lymph and why this also is important as a part of the circulatory system? Now, all these will be the subtopics covered as of today. Now, coming to the first one. Now, we have to understand what exactly is blood and what are its components and what are those made up of. So blood is the only transportation medium we have for all the entire processes, whatever it is, the waste products, the oxygen which is being taken or the carbon dioxide which is to be delivered to through the respiratory system. So the only medium which can circulate all these substances, ions, salts, everything is through the blood transportation system. Why only blood? Because we do not have any other mode which is so flexible and which can transport everything which comes from our body, either as substances or of waste products. Now let's look at what are the blood and its components first, and then we'll go back to understand what exactly happens in all these components. Now on the screens you can see the blood is made up of certain substances. Now here I have given you blood. But before the blood cells, blood is made up of plasma. Now this plasma is the liquid part or the fluid part of the blood. And it has its own solid components. So the solid components of blood will be the RBCs, the WBC, and what we call as the platelets. Now, what is this plasma we are talking about? Plasma is a straw-colored liquid and it takes up almost 55% of the entire blood system. That is, 55% of the blood is made up of this straw-colored liquid which is plasma. Now, what is the function of this plasma? Why are we talking about this? Because plasma will be the factory to store all these kinds of substances which are necessary either for the transportation or the clotting factors, whatever it is, they're all present in that plasma. So plasma basically is made up of proteins. Then it is also made up of innumerable number of salts like sodium, calcium and the phosphates, all these salts which are needed for the body. And also the clotting factor, which is a precursor, that's the fibrinogen, is also present in the plasma. Basically, it is a storehouse for all these products. They are all released into the bloodstream whenever necessary and whenever the function is needed of. Now, plasma takes up about 55%. Now, what is with the solid components? The solid components take the rest of that is the 45% we are talking about. And in this 45%, RBCs will play a very important role. So the maximum number of cells will be RBC, then it will be the platelets, and finally it will be the WBC. Now this is the order through which we follow. So RBC is most important. I'm not talking about the importance part, it's about the number part we are talking here, RBC, then the platelets and then the WBC. So this is the division of the blood and what it is made up of. So now let's look at what is present in the blood cells. Now onto the screens we see that there are RBCs here and then we have the white blood cells and you also have the platelets which are called as the thrombocytes. Now we will try to understand this. RBCs are otherwise known as erythrocytes. They are otherwise known as the erythrocytes and WBCs are otherwise known as the leukocytes. Now these things which are given below here, they're all types of WBCs. All these are types of WBCs, and the one we are seeing here, platelets and thrombocytes, are used for clotting. Now these are the solid components, and so we'll try to understand one by one what are present in this particular place. Now coming to what we have to understand, the RBCs first. RBCs are red blood corpuscles, otherwise called as the erythrocytes. We already saw that. Now, why RBCs are very important? Because RBCs are the ones which pick up the oxygen from the blood capillaries through the lungs and circulate it through the entire body in the form of oxygenated blood. Now, the pickup of oxygen is very important because oxygen is necessary for all the tissues to survive. So, that is oxygenate. The first and foremost will be the transportation of oxygen. Now, what is the shape of RBCs? RBCs are generally biconcave in shape. Now, when I say biconcave, you always find a nucleus in the beginning of the RBC formation, that is in the embryonic stages. But as it grows mature, and then when the baby comes out and the organisms grow bigger, now what happens is they lose their nucleus. So they become enucleated. Now what is enucleated? Nucleus is not there. And why does this RBC lose its nucleus? That's the first question what we think of. Now what is it like? So if I am removing a nucleus from that particular cell, that means I am getting more place for filling up oxygen. So RBCs get enucleated because they want to transport more oxygen and then they can be carried into the tissues. And since nucleus is absent, we will not be seeing even mitochondria, which is not there in the RBC. So the mitochondria, the Golgi complex, all these are all not there. And now why mitochondria is not there? You all know mitochondria picks up oxygen for oxygen by oxidation. So since if there is mitochondria, the oxygen which is taken up by the RBCs will be utilized. To stop this utilization and then give the entire amount of that oxygen to that particular tissues, now they lose their mitochondria also. So mitochondria, other organelles like the Golgi complex, what we saw, the nucleus, all these are absent in the case of RBCs. Now RBCs are greater in number, we said. So RBCs are greater in number because they have to carry oxygen. That's why the greater in number. Now what is their lifespan? So every cell will have its own lifespan. Now what is the lifespan we are talking about? It is 120 days. So my cells live only for 120 days. Now what happens after that? Now where do I get my RBCs from so that I have to continue circulating the blood in the system? Now RBCs are produced in the bone marrow. It is produced in the bone marrow where fresh RBCs will be prepared every 4 months. And if I want the new cells to be prepared, I have to destroy the old cells, right? So the destruction of RBCs will take place in the spleen as well as in the liver. So when we studied the digestive system, we said that the liver was giving out certain pigments. That is, the bile juices had these pigments, the bilirubin and the biliverdin. Now what are these pigments we are talking? They are nothing but once the RBC is broken down, the pigments are all released into the bile juices. So the feces, whatever color they get, it is because of this particular substance, the pigments which come from the breakdown of RBC. So the lifespan is 120 days. It's a biconcave. It is enucleated at an adult stage so that it can transport more amount of oxygen. Now RBCs make up an important pigment. What is the pigment? So we all know blood is red in color. How does it become red in color? That is because it contains a pigment which is called as the hemoglobin. Now this hemoglobin is made up of 2 components. One is called the heme component, which is an iron component, and the other one is a globin, which is a protein component. Now this iron component is the one which actually carries the oxygen to different parts of the body. Now if there is a deficiency of iron, we tend to lose that amount of blood status. So the percentage of hemoglobin in the blood comes down. So we all know we need to maintain certain amount of hemoglobin percentages in the blood, and there is little extra amount of hemoglobin in males as compared to that of the females. So whatever it is, without iron, we cannot make this pigment which is hemoglobin. Globin is the protein part. Now this is all about the RBCs. Now let's look at the next one, which is called as the WBCs. Now here you know on this is you have the WBCs, otherwise called as the leukocytes, we said. Now leukocytes are generally made up of 5 different types. You can see it on the screen. So this is the eosinophil. Now this will be the basophil, and this will be the neutrophil, the monocytes and lymphocytes. Now the basophil, the eosinophil and the neutrophils, they are all together called as the granulocytes. So granulocytes include all the 3, that is the basophil, the eosinophil as well as the neutrophil. Now why do we call them as granulocytes? Because you can see in that structure they carry certain amounts of small granules inside like this. So we call them as granulocytes. Now the other 2 do not have granules, so they are given the name agranulocytes. Now these agranulocytes are monocytes and the lymphocytes. Now what are the functions we are talking about when I say WBC? WBC on a whole is very important because they fight against the diseases, and they are all very important for maintaining our immunity levels. They do not have this hemoglobin, so they are white in color. Now WBCs, apart from this, the eosinophils help us to fight against allergic reactions. You must have all come across certain allergies in your lifetime, the pollen allergy, the dust allergy, which causes a condition called eosinophilia. So the eosinophils are for fighting allergies. Now the basophils and the neutrophils together will work against the immunity system of the body. Especially the basophils, which contain certain substances to fight against the allergic reactions. This helps in reducing allergies, but the fighting has to come through certain substances, and that comes from the basophils. Neutrophils act as natural antibiotics to the body. Whenever there is an invasion of microorganism, they will start fighting against that microorganism. So they are all natural antibiotics which are present in our body. Now coming to the monocytes as well as the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are the maximum structures which help in fighting against diseases. They contain certain cells which are called as the lymphatic cells. So these lymph cells, or the lymphocytes we call them, now they help in maintaining our immunity as by birth and also throughout our life. They have different types of cells to fight against diseases. Now the monocytes, they are the bigger ones, and they are the maximum amount present in the case of the WBCs, and they fight against diseases. So one common characteristics of all these things is WBCs, whenever they want to fight diseases, they change their shape. Now, so these cells do not have a definite shape. So we call them as an amoeboid shape, because you all know amoeba does not have any shape. And why do they need this particular shape? So whenever there is an infection inside the, say, the smallest of capillaries or an area, they have to reach the area immediately. So these cells, if they are of a compact shape, they will not enter into the blood vessels to go to those places. So WBCs will squeeze themselves, changing their shape in the form of amoeboid shapes. So they squeeze through even the smallest of capillaries to fight against infections. And now that squeezing, we call it as diapedicus. Now diapedicus is the way they enter into the blood vessels so that they can fight against diseases by changing the shape and squeezing at that particular place. Now what about the, coming to the blood platelets? Blood platelets, otherwise called as the thrombocytes, you can already see here. Now they are very important for the clotting of blood. So you people have, all of you must have experienced at least once when there is an injury, when there is a loss of blood, and the blood, you always have that fear, what will happen? So much of blood is actually gushing out of our body. Now this will not happen so in a normal case unless you have a deficiency of that particular substance. Now bleeding will be stopped within a minute's time, and that stoppage of bleeding during any kind of injury, we call it as clotting of blood. Now, thromboplatelets and thrombocytes, whatever, give any name to it, they are useful in helping to clot the blood immediately within a minute's time. Now, what will happen if the blood doesn't clot? You all know it ends up losing a lot of blood, and it happens in a condition where there is deficiency of vitamin K. Now, vitamin K is very, very important as a clotting factor. The people who cannot have this clotting factor, they have a disease what is called as the bleeder's disease. Now this bleeder's disease is because the vitamin K and other clotting factors are missing from that blood. So the blood starts clotting all the way. Now more about this clotting and how the clotting occurs, we will be looking at when we take up the next session. So right now we are now trying to understand what are the different components of this blood. So blood clotting for platelets. Now these are all the important functions of the blood and its blood cells. So we will not be looking at only these functions. Blood has so many other functions which we can think of. Now coming to the other functions of the blood. So let's try to analyze what are the different functions of blood till now what we have taken here. So we said blood is necessary because it is a medium for transportation. And it produces the RBCs, WBCs, blood platelets. So we can give all the functions here. It is a carrier of oxygen. And it is also a carrier of the waste product, that is carbon dioxide. It carries the hormones which are present from the endocrine glands. It takes specifically all these substances which can be moved out or taken inside the system. And even the nitrogenous waste which have to be carried to the kidney so that the kidney will remove it in this particular form. So nitrogenous waste are also carried by the blood. Then we talked about hormones, then we talk about the salts, and it also carries the clotting factors. And along with another substance, that is the lymph, it forms a complete chain so that it transports the entire substances. So we'll see this is a medium for transportation, oxygen, carbon dioxide, then nitrogenous waste to be carried, salts, and all the clotting factors are also present in the sun, in this particular blood. Along with this, any substances which are digested, that is the food. Once it is digested, the digested food is also carried by this particular blood. So why we have to carry this digested substances absorbed by the villi? Because it has to get oxidized and the energy has to be released further for various activities. So these are all the functions of blood and the clotting factors, and the excess of any substances, say sugars, will all be stored if the blood doesn't want to take those sugars. So blood also has this way of carrying sugars to different parts of the body because that is the food which is being carried in maximum. So any excess sugars will be carried to the liver so that it can get stored in the form of glycogen. Now whenever our body needs more of sugar, the glycogen can be broken down so that that particular sugar can be used for various activities. Now these are all the functions of the blood. Now coming to the next one, that is the lymph. We only talked about blood till now as a transportation medium, but there is one more system which is called the lymph. Now what exactly is a lymph? Lymph is an extracellular fluid. When I say extracellular fluid, what does it mean? So whatever extra substances are coming out through the RBCs or the plasma, they don't directly stay in that particular place. They come and fill themselves between the cells. So if I am looking at two RBCs here, so whatever extra substances come out, they all come and fill this particular gap. Now the gaps are all filled with the excess fluid. Now that excess extracellular fluid, we give the term lymph. Now why lymph is important? So lymph is also important because it has these kind of cells which help in immunity. Apart from that, it also picks up waste products, especially the fat products, which has to be digested. Now these fat products are all taken together in a special system. You can see here, now this is called as a lymphatic system. So you can see at junctions, the vessels which are carrying the lymph. Apart from that, you have something called as a lymph node. Now lymph nodes are the junctions where the lymph is actually stored when necessary. And now what will the lymph nodes do? So whenever you need to fight against diseases, these lymph nodes will release that particular lymph. So because I already told you, lymph contains the special factors for fighting against diseases and maintaining the immunity of that organism. So this lymph node, lymphatic capillaries, like all other blood vessels, the capillaries, the lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels together form what is called as the lymphatic system. Now this is a special system. So one of the examples we have already taken when we did the digestive system. In villi, we have seen a blood vessel called lacteals. So when we studied that, we told that these lacteals help in taking out the fats which are broken down into simpler substances. These fats are absorbed by the lacteals so that they can be transported through the body. Now lacteal is one of the lymph vessel which we were talking about. There are so many vessels like that, and all these together will form the lymphatic system. We can call it as an extracellular fluid, or you can also call it as a mediator between the intracellular as well as the outside environment, that is the tissues. So this is about lymph and the extracellular fluid. Now with that understanding, let's look at some of the questions we will see some of the questions from the same topics we just covered. Now the first one is, RBCs are living? Yes, because they had a nucleus in the initial stages. So we will say yes, they are living. How do we justify that? Because they had a nucleus when they were in embryonic stage. They lost their nucleus so that they can absorb more oxygen. To increase that capacity, they have lost their nucleus. So justifying they had a nucleus when they were in the embryonic stages. Now lymph is an extracellular fluid but not involved in transportation. Lymph is an extracellular fluid, but it is not like blood, because blood is the transportation medium we always have, and lymph is only the extra substances which come out. They have their own system to follow. But this lymphatic system, after it takes all the substances from all the other parts of the body, like the unwanted fats and other all these things, it will collect them and directly pour them into the veins. Now veins will collect all the waste products and it will take it for purification. So this actually goes and joins with the veins. So we cannot say lymph is a special system. It is one of the systems to help us to transport certain kinds of important substances. Now where do they go and fill? They all fill it inside the veins. So they will be carried through the veins, and all the veins will join together so that they go for the purification of blood. Now coming to what are the structures which are important for prevent the excessive bleeding. Now the structures or the cells which are very, very important for this is the platelets, otherwise called as the thromboplatelets, or you can also give the term thrombocytes. Now these help in clotting so that the excessive bleeding doesn't take place, unless, as I already told you, if there is a deficiency of vitamin K or any other factors necessary for clotting. So more about this we will be looking at in the next session. We will take up in detail about clotting. Now the next one, mention the components of blood. When we ask this question, so we write what are the different components of blood, write about the plasma, what are the different points about factors of plasma. Then we talk about the solid components, where we will cover the RBCs, WBCs and blood platelets and the functions of RBCs and what do they do, all that can be covered. So you just mention the components of blood and then give in brief what are the different functions and what are the characteristics of plasma and solid components. So you must have all gone through a blood test. So whenever you go for a blood test, you will remove the solid components. So the solid components are removed and then the plasma can be checked for various factors. Now the plasma without the blood without the solid components, okay, the blood without the solid components, we call it as a serum. So serum is a substance where you do not have all these RBCs, WBCs and all, you just have that fluid component and that is called as the serum. Now coming to the next one, what is the disease caused by the deficiency of iron in the body? So we all know this, the deficiency of iron will cause a disease which is very common, which is called as the anemia. Now this anemia occurs because the iron is less and the hemoglobin present in the body has a lesser percentage. And when you have this anemia, you will feel fatigued, weakness, and you will not be able to be working as usual as you do. So this is the deficiency we're talking about. Now coming to the next one, lymph flows in which place? The intracellular space, the extracellular space, or arteries or veins. So lymph is a fluid which is generally present in the extracellular space. We already saw it goes and fills the gap between the different cells. So it fills in the extracellular space. So more about blood. And the heart and other parts of the circulatory system like the blood vessels, the arteries, veins, all that we will be looking it up in the next sessions which are going to follow this. So the next session will be about what is exactly clotting and what happens during clotting. And then we will also be looking at the general structures, that is the arteries, veins and capillaries, so that we understand how blood is being transported from one place to another place. So that will be our next topic in the coming session. So as of now, this is all about for today, and please stay tuned, please keep watching. So that's all for today. We will all catch up in the next session. Thank you so much.